You can hardly see police, embarrassing people for a joint.
So I remember when you went to jail and there was a movement here in Slovenia to free Bozo.
We, cannabis scientists, we know that cannabis has no influence on the driving when you are a regular user. I don't know what your audience think about former Yugoslavia, but former Yugoslavia was not the Eastern Bloc.
I have an important question to ask you, Bozo. How old were you when you first smoked weed? We are in Slovenia, Ljubljana, and today we get to interview someone who is very special in terms of the cannabis industry and the cannabis movement, and one of my best friends in Slovenia. And I just want to welcome the one and only Božidar Radišic to the program. How you doing, Bozo?
Hello, I'm honored to be with you.
Man, we're honored to have you, dude. We were actually just having dinner last night at our favorite place, the restaurant. Bozo and I, we like to go out and eat meat on the grill because that's what we do here in the Balkans. Bozo, why don't you just tell us a little bit about Slovenia? Just describe in your own words how you feel about Slovenia, how you would describe Slovenia to someone else.
Slovenia generally is a miniature country, but we have everything, We have a beautiful sea, we have mountains. In Slovenia you can ski and swim in 2 hours difference. We have still quite healthy environment, but the only thing we don't have yet in Slovenia is good cannabis policy.
Good cannabis policy. But when I'm walking around the streets here in Ljubljana, I see weed everywhere. I actually get to smoke my joint with impunity, it seems. The cops, I've lived in a lot of different countries, and though the cannabis policy here needs to modernize for sure, they say implementation is 90% of the law. And so when you're on the ground here and you're smoking weed, and some places you feel the cops, you feel this we would call a police state, right? Mm-hmm. But in Slovenia, in comparison to all the other places I've lived on the planet, it does not feel so much like a police state. Can you speak to that at all?
Yes, of course. Generally speaking, police regarding cannabis is way more tolerant than our bureaucrats, because we achieved through last 15 years many verdicts on the Supreme Court, and police is following it. So nowadays you cannot find almost any police who will put charges on some patient who is growing for himself. You can hardly see police, embarrassing people for a joint. In Ljubljana, you can openly smoke almost everywhere. So in practice is way better than in theory,
so I
let's
think,
say.
and I think everywhere on the planet you see a disconnect with where the people are at, versus where the politics are at. But a lot of times you'll find the police are in line with the politics. And so they'll still be cracking skulls for
not in Slovenia. There are some data that almost 1/3 of Slovenians are using cannabis regularly.
Almost 1/3?
Almost 1/3. And I think also many police is in this 1/3 of the population.
For me, it seems very accepted. It seems that everybody, when you bring up, like when I tell people what I do here in Slovenia, everybody's interested and everybody's curious. And I've had nobody say, or I've never felt, I can hardly think of one example where someone like had some visceral recoil because I told them something that they were just appalled by. No, it's actually on the contrary.
Exactly.
People are so open in Slovenia. So why do you think the public is so, because I've lived in other European countries also, and it's not like it is in Slovenia. I've lived in Holland also, and it's not as open for general society. Here, it just seems like people really just don't give a fuck. They just know that cannabis is a benign plant. They just, in general, I think people don't give a fuck here. And what I mean by that is they think, you do your thing, I do my thing, we leave each other alone. Is that kind of what's going on here?
Yes, more or less. More or less. And this is the result of our movement, or let's say activism in the last 15 years, you know, because we were mostly focused on the patients and the sick people, not on the smoking milieu.
Yeah, yeah.
And with this, especially if you have a lot of scientific data behind, you turn over the public opinion against some things, you know. We already started, and one reason is also because we organized like 10 scientific conferences until now. Back in the days when I was in jail, it was everywhere on the national television, all newspapers, you know, magazines. And this is when people start to think, really, you know, when...
So I remember when you went to jail, and there was a movement here in Slovenia to free Bozo.
Yes.
And that's still your email domain to this day. Can you tell us what happened? Because as far as I know, you went on a hunger strike in prison.
Yes, I went on a hunger strike. Interesting times. I was. I had opened one old case from 2008. But I wasn't prosecuted for 4 years. And then in 2012, they imprisoned me because of a few plants, you know, on my garden. But I openly grow cannabis since, I don't know, 20 or more years. I never hid it because you cannot hide a 4-meter plant on your in your garden, you know. I knew it was very unjust because it was for actually very small amount, you know, and the judge was, let's say, not very happy with cannabis because I live in very rural area on the Hungarian border, and the situation there is way different than in Ljubljana, you know. I used to have a friend, he unfortunately died. I met him in prison, where he got in Murska Sobota 1 year prison for 1 gram of weed.
1 gram. Was that a possession charge, or did they somehow get him for cultivating or distributing too?
No, just possession. Just possession.
He did a year for that. How long ago was that?
12 years.
Only 12 years ago.
Yes.
And you don't just to interject, do you think that would happen now?
No.
Not even in your area?
All. And that was also unjust in
for that time, it was an abnormal case? Very
abnormal case. And I didn't know actually that it happened until I went to the jail, and he was in the same cell with me, and he presented me the papers.
The papers,
you know. Yeah, because cannabis, you know, in Slovenia, let's say 20, 15 years ago, was... easy money for police, for prosecutors, for attorneys, and for judges.
So that's what I mean about the police state. Usually the police will, or a lot of jurisdictions, they'll go for that low-lying fruit. So how did that change?
They realized that it's counterproductive. You know, I am helping people since 2012 when I was in jail. I can tell you that we freed at least 15 or 20 people on the Supreme Court who were already convicted. So, you know.
So your activism work started setting new precedents.
Yes.
Yes. All the way to the
Supreme Court. Yeah. I was lucky to have a good friend, very high in these circles, lawyer and so on, and he advised me how to do it. But I was always calling out the human rights. You know,
the human rights aspect of why we
of
should
cannabis,
of
yes,
prohibition.
Of course, we have. Listen, cannabis is the most researched plant on the planet. More than 150,000 studies. It means like 7 studies a day are published on cannabis, and we are still imprisoning people because they want to help themselves. You know, this is really crazy, because none of those who were convicted was trafficker. It was always just for themselves, growing cannabis at home, you know.
So you're talking about a lot of convictions in Slovenia were just for cultivating at home.
Cultivating, mostly in possession.
Uh-huh.
It was never trafficking even mentioned, but you know, courts and prosecutors, they somehow put on this equal scale.
Yeah.
It should not be. Trafficking is trafficking and possession is something else.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it all should be, we both think it all should be legal, but when you're looking at it from a legal lens, clearly one's more benign than the other.
I would say legal, you know, legal, I agree, but cannabis is legal in Slovenia right now. Legality, it means that we have certain laws about cannabis, but it should be regulated more logically and more towards patient-orientated, you know.
So if you could, what would you do if you could snap your fingers and make new policy now in Slovenia? What would you do? And are there any other countries in Europe or or America or states in America or the world that you see as examples to use for Slovenia? If I pick from different countries, different regulations, we can put something good together. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because always something what should not be. Let's, for example, Czech Republic.
Yeah.
They legalized how many? 15 years ago?
Yeah. Look where we are now.
And last year when I was on Cannafest, the police is still bothering people for smoking a joint on the cannabis event. You know, it's really don't. But
still at Cannafest, the police
still,
are because I heard they were sometimes at Cultiva a couple of years ago.
Also in Cultiva, many people are losing their driver's license. You know, because they are checking. This is another issue with cannabis. You know, it
reminds me
crazy.
In America when they used to just cops used to just sit outside the Grateful Dead, wait till the Grateful Dead concerts were over, and just bust people. But you know,
very similar.
Yeah,
very similar. But we cannabis users and cannabis scientists, let's put it that way, we know that cannabis has no influence on the driving when you are a regular user.
Well, that's funny.
And, if you don't mix it with alcohol.
Of course, yeah.
That's it.
Well, that's funny you say that because I think there's 2 studies done on that. There was a study, I think, in Jamaica done about that, driving in cannabis. And, you know, I think that's the dirty little unknown secret, you know, that all us cannabis users clearly know that you're not impaired because it's a matter of impairment. You know, because I know when I've had 3 or 4 drinks in a couple hours, maybe I know I probably shouldn't drive. You know, but when it comes to cannabis, you know your impairment level. Each individual knows their impairment level. So there was another study done by I think it was Sanjay Gupta when he came out with that second CNN. His first one was the Charlotte's Web, which blew everything up, you know, which really helped the movement in America and beyond. And then the second one, he said that was their conclusion is they did an experiment and they had 2, I guess you'd call them test groups, not a control group, but there was the drivers who had smoked pot. See, this is the point. Just because you smoke pot doesn't mean you're stoned. So there was the drivers that smoked pot that were regular pot smokers, and then there was the drivers who smoked pot that were not regular pot smokers. And clearly, the drivers that were regular users were not impaired. They drove perfectly fine, and the ones who weren't used to cannabis and were just high as shit, you know, it's like, and you wouldn't recommend to anyone who was a novice, you know, it's like, hey, if you're going to smoke, don't drive. So I think these are like really interesting, almost esoteric facts in the cannabis world that make cannabis something like, you know, in alcohol, you can, even in alcohol, there's, hey, you could have 0.08 in your system, and some people will be able to drive better than others.
Yes, and some people are not able with 0.2 in the system.
Exactly.
Therefore, the doctor's job is to determine your impairment.
Exactly.
You know, not just because I have metabolites in the blood. You know, I smoke for 47 years now, cannabis. I have to knock on wood. I never had a car accident. And I smoke all the time, you know me.
Yeah.
So I can clearly say it doesn't affect driving. You drive slower, you drive way more careful.
Right.
Especially than on alcohol. But there
and
is another
your senses
thing.
Are heightened too.
Of course.
Bit, yeah.
There is also another thing. Last year I was on the parliamentary committee for health committee, and there was also a guy from police, Ministry of Internal Affairs, and he was, you know, giving us some data on the traffic accident and so on. So alcohol is responsible for more than 30% of all car accidents in Slovenia. And you can have up to 0.5, you know.
Is that what it is in Slovenia?
Yes, 0.5. You don't pay a fine. And later, if you are drunk as hell, you can get your driver's license back on parole, you know, and you pay some fine. In cannabis, or all drugs in Slovenia, are responsible for 0.3% of the all accidents. And you pay 1,800 euro fine, and they take your driver's license away.
They take
for
it,
what?
Yeah, and they take it if you're driving. I heard in Germany, they take your driver's license if you just get caught with cannabis in your system, even if you're driving or not.
Yes. It's crazy, you know.
Yeah.
It should not be. And there is another issue which I hope that I will soon bring somebody's case to the Supreme Court, because nowadays also in public services, public jobs, let's say, you know, court, police, and so on, you should not use cannabis at all.
Do they drug test?
Yes. And this is completely against the Constitution, because if you are my employer, it's not your business what I do outside of my working time.
Yeah.
Until I fulfill my contract with you as the employer.
Do they add prescription drugs to that also?
Not really. Not really. Just illicit drugs.
Just illicit drugs.
But you know, illicit drugs are more than 400 on the list, but they just check a few: cocaine, heroin, and cannabis and methamphetamines, maybe, and such.
No, but again, here's the crux of the issue, I think, is impairment. If you're driving, are you impaired or not? If you're at work, are you doing a good job or not? Are you impaired?
Exactly.
And I think a lot of this stuff, I know a lot of this stuff in America has to do with liability issues, and so they've got to put the blame on someone at some time.
Yes.
The system, and so they'll basically, you know, because of liability, they'll have to be like, well, head of cannabis, well, no, even though that mistake was made, but we can't associate it with you being impaired. It's some maybe other spurious thing that happened. That, well, you've got to go. You drug tested, no. So, but this could be a good employee, but then the system is compelled to fire them or let them go because of liability stuff. Is that similar in Slovenia at all? Because I generally know Europe, they don't have quite as much liability.
Europe is very, very, very strange on this issue of cannabis and drugs, you know, because Europe have a big bureaucrat system, and it's divided from Europe to the national, and Europe is not a good example for anything on the field of drugs. But there are some bright lights.
All this talk about drugs makes me want to smoke.
Yeah. You know, there are bright lights like Malta now, Germany especially, because Germany is very strong country in European Union, Luxembourg, and others. But the difference, you know, we live in the same countries. It's similar like in the States. In California or in... You can smoke anywhere, everywhere, but in Arkansas, they will lock you up for 20 years.
Right.
You know, it's crazy. And I think that punishment and the policies towards any drugs should be based on scientific data, not just because I use drugs. You know.
Do you think it's going to change? And doesn't
I hope so.
And do you think, obviously, the EU has to, or the UN and the EU have to change their mandates towards drug policy, or Germany just has to do what Canada does and just say, fuck it, we're going to do what we want. You can't really, how punitive can you be against us or towards us if it's Germany, the economic engine? So I'm not sure if Germany will.
Good example for Germany, now you mentioned Germany, is that they asked European Union if they agree, you know, with the changes on cannabis policy in Germany. And they didn't, but they did it anyway. Right. You know what I mean? Right. So it can be done.
Right.
It can be done. And more states or more countries will join this club, easier will be for others.
So for Slovenia, are they ever going to, they're so small, you know, we only have so much arable land here. Are they, where do you think, where's Slovenia's niche in terms of the cannabis market in Europe?
The niche is knowledge, science, and boutique products. Mm-hmm. We don't have big areas like Ukraine or, you know, other big countries to have thousands of hectares of hemp. Slovenia is 22,000 square kilometers. You know, it's 2 million.
I think that's the size of New Jersey.
Yeah, something like that. But maybe until last September, when you organized the ICBC in Bled, you didn't even realize how much knowledge is already in Slovenia. You know, how many people are working on the cannabis research from Hobbs Institute to everywhere, actually. Yeah. And this event was very good because we showed the cannabis and all the movement from different angles.
So you have a company. You're not just an activist, you're a businessman also. Tell us a little bit about your company, Research Nature.
Yes. It's all started back in 2014 when I realized that there will be no changes if you don't do it properly. So I started organizing scientific conferences. Mm-hmm. I invited people, the best researchers from all over the world, and we started that way. Then I realized that it's not enough if I want to do something, or we all together want to do something with this field, we have to take scientific approach. So I founded Research Nature Institute with my unfortunately late partner from Slovakia. The guy had prostate cancer and he was cured of it. Now he died from some other things, which were, we will not talk about this today. And he bought us GCMS, so, you know, gas chromatography, because one of the goals was I wanted to prove to our government that there is no influence on driving when you smoke cannabis. So there was a project with Ministry of Internal Affairs and police where we wanted, because we have some polygons in Vransko for safe driving, you know, where we wanted to prove what is the influence of cannabis on average. But they stepped back and, because they know. There is no influence. But then again, already back in 2015, we started to profiling the cannabis products which are on the black market. People buying from dealers, or suppliers. And then step by step, we developed then, a lot of projects going on. Then with my colleague Roman, we somehow succeed. I still don't know how.
That was with University of Ljubljana.
Yes. So there was an idea. Roman Stukel, he was on the Faculty of Health Sciences, doing some other things, and he said, "Listen, we could do something. Would you buy DAD UV detector for cannabinoids? And maybe we start profiling cannabinoids." And I said, "Of course."
And that's when you started working with the University of Ljubljana?
Yes. So first our institute bought DAD detector. And when we got the GCMS, we signed the agreement of cooperation. And I installed the GCM at the machine in the laboratory of faculty in Ljubljana. So that was the start. Until now, we participated on 12 PhDs with our machine, with our help. We are profiling for patients, for growers, for industry, So as any other thing, it's developing through years.
If people want to reach out to you, is there a website you can go to?
researchnature.com.
Researchnature.com.
Yes. But, Slovenia is so small that hardly anybody...
Is this just for Slovenians, or can other people outside of Slovenia participate?
It's outside. We also do some profiling for big companies. But still, we are growing, and you have to start small.
Well, for sure. And Slovenia is small. It's a great place to beta products, I think. And if you can make it in Slovenia, I think you can make it anywhere. And what's great about what you said is Slovenia does have, it's like a little Switzerland, a little Holland, a little Israel. That's how I feel when I'm here.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, and the people have this connection. They're very highly educated people. I think it's the Dutch and the Slovenians that speak the most languages per country, per individual on average. And when I'm here, I'm really blown away by the talent in Slovenia and all the research capabilities. We've had meetings with all the people we've had meetings with, all these institutions, and it's a high level of work that they do. And I think it's only a matter of time that I agree with you. I think that Slovenia's niche is research and development, and I'm excited to see where that goes. But I have an important question to ask you, Bozo. So how old were you when you first smoked weed?
13.
13. Where was that?
In Murska Sobota.
In Murska.
Behind the school.
Behind the school?
Yes.
Did you get high? Because sometimes you smoke the first couple. Yeah.
Not really.
I didn't get high the first time I smoked
either. Not really.
I was 12.
Yeah. But, back in the days, that was 1975. Nobody bothered us because of cannabis.
Yeah.
It's all started later when, let's say, after the 2000.
So that was actually one of my questions. So it started after 2000. Interesting. What was the cannabis scene like in Yugoslavia? Because that in the 70s was obviously Yugoslavia.
It was illicit drug.
It was illicit.
But nobody gave a shit.
So kind of like now, or like now? Or?
Like now. It was, hard to buy, hard to get, but it was everywhere. I studied in Ljubljana, everywhere. Everybody was smoking cannabis,
Yeah.
But more hiding. It was more private. It's not
as
open like today.
Right.
But nobody went to jail, actually.
And who was using cannabis then? Did it have a certain demographic, like the artists, quote unquote, or was it the workers, or was it
students? You know,
professors?
Yeah, it was still a hippie movement back in 70s.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what your audience think about former Yugoslavia, but former Yugoslavia was not the Eastern Bloc. We could go anywhere with our Yugoslavian passport.
So I think that's a really good distinction that the audience should know, because it's a big misconception that Yugoslavia was part of the Eastern Bloc, which meant that it was part of the Soviet Union, which meant that it was more of a Stalinistic communism.
Not at all.
It wasn't. It was a Tito communism, which is bordering on like heavy socialism. Because I think the biggest distinction, because I remember growing up, you know, in the 70s and 80s and thinking the Soviet Union was the most evil place in the world, solely because you couldn't leave the country without special permission, and we had people that would defect, and that was always like a big thing. But in Yugoslavia, you didn't have that restriction, correct?
No.
You could go
travel anywhere.
Yeah.
With Yugoslavian passport, I could travel to Moscow or to Afghanistan or to
I remember there was
United States, whatever.
That the Yugoslavian passport actually could go to more countries than an American passport for a while.
Yes. Actually, Yugoslavia was a promised land for Eastern Bloc because Hungarians, Bulgarians,
everything surrounding it.
They could not go to the West, but they could go to Slovenia, to
Really
Yugoslavia.
interesting.
Because Czechs, Slovaks, Hungarians, they visited Yugoslavia, the coast, Dalmatian coast, as a tourist.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's fascinating. But so they could go as a tourist, but then couldn't they, if they wanted to escape then from Croatia, wouldn't
that was
take a
special
boat to
rule.
Italy? Or?
You know, I lived just on the Hungarian border, and my aunt lived in Hungary. And always when their family came over, one member of family has to stay home.
So I get it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can go, but somebody is behind.
Oh my God! Yeah, and I think that's the reason most people didn't defect, because of those. Yeah, that's a really good point. But interesting, I didn't know that they had the privilege to come into Yugoslavia, so they could go to they could go to Dubrovnik or Split or something if they wanted. Oh wow, that's interesting. So the cannabis scene, but then you said in 2000. Okay, so then Yugoslavia breaks up. Slovenia becomes a country. What, in 91, something like that?
Yes.
And then it got bad for 10 years. Things started to decline?
First 10 years, it was a chaos, more or less. But then in 2000, we accepted the law about the illicit drugs. And then the bureaucrats saw their opportunity, and police. And they started to really push, you know.
Oh, so it started to get bad in 2000.
Yes, in 2000 was, and then after this.
Was that because Slovenia was coming into the EU and wanted to be a good boy or whatever?
No, just because the new law. You know, just because of the new law, because always when the new law is introduced, they want to show that they are fulfilling everything. But it doesn't last for long, you know. Because they mixed up criminal law with the minor offenses. Because since 2000, nobody in Slovenia or Slovenia, should not be jailed for possession of any illicit drug. Because possession is not a criminal offense. Trafficking is.
Yeah. So that's when you say drugs are legal or cannabis is legal, you said before, that's the qualifier right there.
Yes. But the problem is that every bureaucrat or every police or every prosecutor, you know, try to push a bit more.
So yeah, well,
So,
but they can't. And when you say try, the prosecutor would then have to go for, well, they're trafficking or something,
Yes.
right? Because they can't get them for
Yes.
possession.
And for trafficking, they have very, very stupid reasons, like too high electricity consumption, or if you are unemployed and you have plants at home, you will sell them, and such a bullshit, you know.
Yeah.
So without any evidence.
Yeah.
And this is what we start to fight. And today, you know, a friend of mine, a doctor, a medical doctor, grew for his wife cannabis because she has cancer. And police came, they want to prosecute him, but it stops on the first level on the court. You know? This is not a criminal offense.
Yeah, right. So the police will still sometimes try to push where they can.
Yes.
And then at generally the first level,
especially some rookies in police, you know, they want to prove themselves. But before, Slovenia had around 2,500 criminal cases on cannabis a year. On 2 million people, that's a lot, you know.
Yeah.
But
that's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's 2.5%, or it's 1.25%.
Yeah. Not as much as in the States, but a lot.
It's a lot. Well, I don't know. Per capita, that's almost as much as the States, maybe, per capita.
Yes. But not today anymore. Not today anymore. If they don't catch you with really big amount, with some proof of trafficking, you will just get fined or not even this.
I feel extremely safe here. So was that the time you became an activist?
Oh, yeah, the activist, what is activism, you know?
Yeah. When you proactively started to...
The big jump into activism was when I was imprisoned, you know? Then I was stupid and stubborn enough that I said, fuck you, I go on the hunger strike.
And how long did you go on your hunger strike for?
Oh, 82 days.
82 days?
Yes. I lost like 28 kilos. I was like in Auschwitz.
You lost 28 kilos?
Yeah.
That'd be about almost 65 pounds.
Almost one third of my weight. Yes, I lost.
That's crazy.
It was interesting time.
Yeah, I bet. But I remember it, and you got a lot.
But then they dropped the charges.
Right.
You know, I just got on parole for 1 year, so it was the fight between me and the judge. Because, you know, he expected to be there and say, oh, I'm sorry,
right.
and so on, but I fight back. You know, I fight back. I was fighting with the prosecutor. I was fighting with the judge. Then I achieved that I got another judge because I proved this was corrupt and stupid. You know, so...
You got the judge switched?
Yeah, I was yelling on him as hell.
Oh my God.
You know, in the courtroom.
That takes balls, man.
Yeah, I know, but I was in investigation prison. You know, they could lock me up to 10 years. What I have to lose?
They can lock you up. They can keep you there for 10 years?
Because they charge me as an organization, and it's 5 to 15.
Oh my God.
Not 3 to 10.
Oh, that's insanely scary. And so that means you had to have even bigger balls. You weren't just facing a year. Oh my God.
And when you are in investigation prison, you know, you don't have contact to outer world. You have telephone call to your lawyer and your family, and they are all listening.
Yeah.
You don't have internet. You don't have telephone. It's really hard to communicate. You have to write letters.
And your lawyer you communicate through your lawyer who comes visits you?
Yes, I had the best lawyer ever imagined because he done everything what I want to do from him.
That's great.
So he was there just as a...
That's great. That's great.
And he told me, Mr. Radišic, this we will not win. You will go to jail. I said, don't worry, Mr. Hari, we will win. And I had 12 criminal charges, and I was actually just one was successful for them.
And that was your probation then?
Yes.
You got from that? Oh my God. What a story. Well, I know you changed Slovenia in a big way. You know, I think that's really important for people to know in the cannabis industry. We think we just got here and now here we are, but there was a lot of people who took risk, went to prison, actually cared about it. You know, it's not just the economics of cannabis shouldn't be legal because of the economics. It might be legal because of the economics of it. But the human rights aspect of it is it's a civil liberty to use cannabis, and I think you proved that in Slovenia and made really big inroads in the culture here.
We all did, yes. It was a long way, with thorny way, you know. But yeah, you can see the difference. You started to come to Slovenia 20 years ago.
21 years
How
ago.
was 20 years ago?
Well,
everybody hiding, more or less.
Well, actually, 20 years. That's actually a funny story, because that's one of the reasons I fell in love with Slovenia, because I came here in 2002 to Piran, right? And I had a little tiny piece of hash with me, and then after like 3 days, it was gone. So I started asking on the streets in Piran. And the first thing when I did get to Piran, spray painted on the rocks on the promenade around the Punta, was Piransterdam. And I was like, Piransterdam? Oh, shoot, that's cool. And so then, and this is a true story. So I found someone on the street. I said, well, can I get some weed? He said, yeah, come to the Punta bar at 7 o'clock at 1900. And I said, okay. So I went to the Punta bar, and I was expecting to see him just in the cut, in the corner or whatever, and back. And he was at the shrunk, the bar. He was the bar behind the bar, and I was like, hey. And he was like, hey. And I was like, oh, you know, I just wanted like a few, 5 grams or whatever. And back then it was $12. And he was like, well, it's 5,000 $12 or something like that, right? Which would be about 20 euros or something like that. And he reached under the counter, and without a bag or anything, just put some, I think it was some Albanian weed. So it was seedy or whatever, but I was happy to have something. And I just looked at him. I gave him the 5,000 $5,000, and he just looked at me. And there was the weed all over and I just took my shirt and I put it into my shirt, rolled up my shirt, and kind of duck walked back to my hotel with my weed in my shirt. And I just knew that I had found home at that point. You know what I mean? So for me,
and you stayed.
Yeah, and I was coming. I had lived in Amsterdam for that. Yeah, and I stayed. But I was living in Amsterdam, and I actually thought, wow, there's something even more free. And maybe that's because that was Obala. That's how we say the coast here in Slovenian. But maybe there was some other, a little bit different spirit. But I also remember going to Ljubljana at that time and going to the Schmouts and smoking weed at the Schmouts, and nobody gave a fuck. And I was like, wow, this is insane. It felt so open even back then, right? Now, people seem to smoke everywhere in Ljubljana.
Everywhere.
And it's no big deal.
When you pass through Ljubljana, every 5 meters you smell weed or something, you know.
Yeah, Bozo, so even 20 years ago, it was pretty open, and that just shows how crazy it is.
Because you were on the coast and in Ljubljana. If you would come to our region, then it's something else.
I know. I moved to Steyerska for a while, and it was definitely different. But at the same time, I used to go to a place called Pekarna to do music, and it felt like what's Christiana in Denmark, where they kind of have that open,
similar.
that squat, that open, free, yeah.
Or Metelkova.
Metelkova. I didn't know Metelkova. Actually, I did know. I knew they both existed. So Metelkova is the bigger version of the free state of Ljubljana, where they take the old army barracks and turn it into a squatters area, and then the squatters make it what it is, and the cops kind of leave them alone, or
it's tolerated.
It's tolerated.
Here and then, when rookies are in Ljubljana, because they send them usually from the rural area to Ljubljana, they may have some problems, but it's very, very rare that you have any problems. Because I will tell you, do you think that police didn't know what is going on in Pekarna or in Metelkova? Yeah. They could raid that place every day.
Yeah, right.
But they didn't.
Right.
Because nothing happened there. There was never any problems. You know what I mean? Because where is the weed, there is no problem.
Right. That's amazing. That's one of the reasons I've always loved Slovenia. They're just really cool on the weed scene, and you go outside of Slovenia, you don't feel as safe or
At all.
Yeah. And then you come back into Slovenia and you feel super safe. So here we are in Slovenia with these very open and liberal attitudes towards cannabis, politically or policy-wise. Where do you see Slovenia in 5 years? Do you have hope that things are going to change in Slovenia?
Yes, my hope is for years now.
I guess you gotta always have hope.
Yeah, but now you are in Slovenia and you know a bit about our political system, about our parties and so on.
Yeah,
we have very unstable governments. Rarely one government stays all 4 years.
Yeah.
And before the election, they all promising we will do it, we will make it better, we will legalize or regulate or whatever. But they all forget after the elections. And this is now for 20 years like this.
I guess the better question is, where do you want Slovenia to be in 5 years?
Normal country, regarding human rights, because use of cannabis is also a human right, because every use of cannabis is therapeutic.
And what has to happen then to make that happen? Because I agree with what you say completely.
We have to put a bit more effort. We are doing it already.
Yep.
I think we will raise now voice a bit in the parliament soon. Not yelling, but raise a voice.
But just know what I mean? Make the message heard.
And if there is any common sense among politicians, it should be done yesterday, or at least this year,
right
before the elections,
right?
Because after the elections, then you have to work on new connections, new, let's say, lobbying. I don't like the word, but it is kind of lobbying, because you have to organize politicians, bureaucrats, journalists, everything to come.
It's organizing, for sure.
So I think with your help and our work, we will do it this year.
Okay, well, from your lips to God's ears, Bozo, thank you for being on this podcast, Where the World Meets Cannabis, the first ICBC podcast. It's been a real honor to have you. Božidar Radišic, researchnature.com. If you want to go check it out, check him out there. Google him. He's our legend in Slovenia. We love him. We love you. Bozo, again, thanks so much, brother.
Thank you, Alex.
Boom.
See you soon in
See you soon.
Barca.